The development context of EvoCreo gives me a very true indie roots vibe, a project born of passion, which took quite a beating along the way, and is now trying to be reborn on PC with a new audience, without abandoning its identity as a classic capture RPG. Based on what Infinity themselves have released and what can be felt in the demo, it seems like a re-release that wants to prove that a mobile game can also have the soul of a PC game when the foundation is good. First, it's impossible not to respect how long of a road this project has traveled. Infinity says work on EvoCreo began way back in 2012, still in prototypes for Android, and that the game was only actually launched on mobile in 2015, after a process that took longer than expected. This kind of history usually shows in the final result. You can feel that it isn't a seasonal product, but rather a game that was stubbornly polished until it could stand on its own. Another thing that helps in understanding the studio is how they describe their own trajectory. Kickstarter to fund it, the need for a publisher to cross the finish line, and then a spin-off project, EvoCreo, that was a financial failure and ended up breaking up the team. When you combine this with the fact that the studio positioned itself for years as mobile specialists, you can read this PC launch as a very conscious attempt to reposition the franchise and seek a more premium breath of fresh air. What stands out the most is that Infinity hits the tactical combat key very hard, and the demo really tries to sell this idea as a differentiator, not just a trading of blows by type. I like this because even with visuals and a structure that recall the classics of the genre, it gives the sensation that they want you to think more about the turn than just repeating the most efficient route. It is also very clear the package of promises they are pushing for PC. Over 170 creatures, the world of Zenith with varied biomes, and a point campaign they say exceeds 30 hours. And there is a detail that, for me, really defines the risk of this port. The material itself highlights that it is story-rich and offline-friendly, which is great, but at the same time brings that fear of an interface and pacing with a mobile feel. And the demo is where people will feel if this was well adapted or just stretched for PC. An interesting part of the context is that it doesn't seem like a launch thrown into the air. There was a demo during the Steam Next Fest period, with a statement highlighting precisely the arrival on PC via Steam and trying to attract fans of the genre to test it. This type of strategy is very smart for a game that needs to convince a PC audience, because the prejudice against mobile ports exists, and the demo becomes a sort of proof before the commitment. My personal impression is that EvoCreo on PC feels like a project that wants to be judged as a complete game, not as an App Store curiosity. If the studio manages to align what it promises, more tactical combat, variety of Creo, and a world with a sense of adventure, with a well cared for port, controls, graphical interface, and fluidity, it could become that comfortable game of capturing that you play for hours without realizing it. The story of EvoCreo on PC seems to follow a very classic trainer's journey line, but with a hook that tries to pull you in from a more personal side, searching for a missing family member while something wrong grows behind the scenes. The world is Zenith, full of creatures called Creo, and the game makes it clear that the adventure is as much about exploring biomes and arenas as it is about unraveling a nefarious plan. This detail of there is something big behind it is what makes me pay attention, because it gives the impression that it isn't just a checklist of badges/arenas, but rather a journey with a narrative objective. The starting point of the plot that I noticed while playing the demo is direct. You start in the world of Zenith looking for your missing father, and along the way, discover an organization called Shadow Hive. This, to me, has the charm of an old portable RPG. That type of story that doesn't try to be cinema, but gives you enough motivation to move forward and see how far the conspiracy goes. And I like that the premise combines well with the genre's structure. Rival, criminal agents, collectors, elemental arenas, seem to be the backbone of progress, but always with the shadow of mystery hanging over it. When the demo fits this type of rhythm, battle, capture, exploration, with small clues to the plot, it gives that sensation that every city might bring a small piece of the puzzle, not just the next mandatory combat. At the same time, you can notice that the story is sold more as context than as the protagonist. The marketing insists heavily on tactical battles, builds, cooldowns, traits, and status, and the narrative seems to function as the glue that pushes you from region to region. Personally, this can be great if the writing is objective and has good moments of discovery, but it can become generically comfortable if Shadow Hive and the family drama become just an excuse to send you to the next objective. Another thing that stands out in how the story is presented is the promise of a long campaign, over 30 hours, and with plot to discover, which suggests plenty of world content and side quests sustaining the adventure. In a game like this, what makes the story work for me isn't just the ending, but the path. NPCs with mini-stories, areas with identity, and that feeling of, I am traversing a living world. And the demo gives a taste of this loop, even without delivering the big twists. The impression that remains is that EvoCreo doesn't try to reinvent the wheel of monster taming in its plot, but attempts to get the basics right with a central mystery that is easy to buy into right away. If the rest of the game manages to keep this narrative thread appearing frequently, instead of vanishing for hours while you just complete arenas, then this simple story could become exactly the kind of addictive and cozy campaign that suits the style of the game. From the demo I played, the game seems like that mixture many people love: monster catching plus light exploration plus turn-based combat, only with a more strategic spice than hit the right type and it's over. The heart of the game, clearly, is the combat. They sell it as tactical, and in practice, the idea is for you to manage the cooldown of moves, status, and traits/passives of your Creo, instead of just spamming the strongest attack. In the demo, this already changes your way of playing because sometimes the best move is exactly the one you need to save for the right timing. And then that satisfying feeling of setting up a 2 to 3 turn plan kicks in. Another part that grabbed me is the team building. The studio speaks of dozens of moveset options and various evolutionary paths per monster. So the fun lies less in what is the strongest legendary, and more in how you combine abilities, elements, and traits to cover weaknesses. As someone who only had contact with the demo, impression is that the game wants you to experiment and not just follow a ready-made recipe for progression. In exploration, what has been disclosed is that classic monster RPG package. Travel through the biomes of Zenith, find and capture over 170 Creo, face rivals, and take on elemental arenas. What I liked in the demo is that this seems very straight to the point. Walk, find a fight, capture, return stronger. The loop is simple, but it is precisely the kind of simple that becomes addictive when the combat has layers. A design detail that catches my attention is how they try to place strategy above rock, paper, scissors. The promotional text itself insists that it's not just combining types. And this message makes sense when you notice the weight of status, cooldown, and traits in the exchanges. Personally, this is what gives me the most hope for the PC port. If the game delivers this depth without becoming slow, it gains its own identity within the genre. I also liked the ambition of modes and objectives beyond the campaign, at least in what was disclosed. Hunting shiny Creo, facing the Colosseum, and even having online battles, ranked and against friends, with the promise of being playable offline too. This gives that feeling of a chill RPG when you just want to level up and collect, but with a skill ceiling for those who enjoy testing strategy against other players. Overall, my opinion is that the demo shows a game that knows exactly what it wants to be. A monster tamer with a classic feel, but with combat that forces you to think about rhythm, resources, and synergy. If at launch they get the adaptation of the interface, controls, and the cadence of battles right, so this tactic doesn't become too much pausing, EvoCreo has everything to be that game you open just to make one capture and realize an hour has already passed. The graphics give me that pleasant sensation of a monster RPG from another era, with very unapologetic pixel art and a focus on legibility, not spectacle. Playing the demo, the impression is that the art direction wants to win you over more through charm and consistency than through modern effects. The first win, for me, is that the game doesn't try to hide its inspiration. The page itself and the promotions harp on retro pixel art, and this appears in the map design, the sprites, and the way the world is presented. It's that visual style that speaks directly to fans of handheld/16-bit RPGs, and the demo reinforces this with an exploration pace that matches the style. I also liked how clean the art is. Even when there's a lot of information, you can understand what is happening without it becoming a carnival of particles. This type of clarity is something that a lot of modern pixel art loses when it tries to be too HD. So EvoCreo seems more grounded in this sense. Regarding the little monsters, the Creo, the impression that remains is of variety, with a foot in cute and aggressive at the same time. Designs that seem made for you to want to collect, but also to recognize quickly in a battle. And since the game promises over 170 creatures, it makes a difference that they have silhouettes and palettes that don't get confused so much. At least, that was what I felt in the slice of the demo. In the scenarios, I like that the visual tries to sell you the idea of diverse environments, and even within the pixel art, you can notice a change of atmosphere between areas, city, routes, interiors, which helps keep everything from looking the same. It isn't the type of art that will make you stop to take a screenshot every time, but it is the type that sustains hours of play without tiring the eyes. If there is a however for me, it is that this retro style demands care in small details, attack animations, transitions, visual feedback of status, and even the sensation of weight when a blow hits. From the demo, I felt that the game hits the mark more on general identity than on impact, so I'm waiting to see if the final version brings a bit more visual punch without betraying the pixel art. Overall, I see EvoCreo's graphics as an invitation for those who enjoy the classic look and want a game that prioritizes readability and charisma, not technology. If a person enters expecting a showcase of effects, they will find it simple, but if they enter wanting that very honest retro aesthetic, the demo already shows that the game knows exactly what it is doing. The performance of the EvoCreo demo for me was exactly the type of experience that doesn't draw attention, and that is a compliment. It runs light, responds fast, and matches the game's 2D pixel proposal. My reading is more about practical sensation, fluidity, input response, stability, than FPS numbers. In my usage, the game gave that impression of being very economical. Movements on the map, screen transitions, and entering battle happen without that annoying lag that sometimes appears in mobile ports. This fits with the idea that the game was designed to be accessible and light, since even on the Steam page the listed requirements are very modest. Windows 10, 1 GB of RAM, and OpenGL 2.1+. What matters most in a turn-based game is frame pacing and clear readability. Opening the menu, choosing a move, going back, switching creatures, and in the demo, I felt that these menus don't fight against you. Responsiveness is important because the combat has cooldowns and status effects, so you interact with the interface a lot. If it were slow, it would kill the rhythm. Where I always get more suspicious, and here the demo reassured me, is regarding random stutters during exploration, like when you enter a new area, or when the music or etc. I didn't have those micro stutters that break immersion, but it is also worth remembering. A demo is generally a small slice, so the real test is when the full game starts loading more variety of areas, effects, and content. Another thing I observe is whether the game maintains consistency when you repeat rapid actions. constantly entering and exiting battle, opening the inventory, messing with the team. In the demo, this repetition didn't seem to degrade performance over time, which suggests a stable base, at least in this section. Since this is a port of a game that was born on mobile and is now arriving on PC, I also stay alert for classic signs of a lazy port: strange cursor, weird scaling, the sensation that the game is running inside a frame. In the demo, the feeling was more of a simple PC game than a stretched app, which is a great sign for perceived performance. My opinion is that the demo inspires confidence. It seems optimized enough to run well on a huge range of PCs, and the visual style helps because it doesn't demand heavy hardware. The only thing I would really leave open is how this behaves in long sessions and in more advanced areas of the full game. But as a first impression, it was very smooth. If the demo was a good portrait of the final game, buying at launch is worth it mainly for those who already know they enjoy classic monster tamers and want to get straight into the loop of capturing, evolving, and optimizing the team. I didn't have the feeling of "this feels raw," so the desire that remains is to play the rest without needing to wait for patches just to get comfortable. I would recommend buying at launch if your priority is the single-player campaign and playing offline without issues, because the game is advertised as offline friendly and has plenty of solo content. In this case, the launch risk is lower. Even if online features take time to mature, you already have the main reason to be there. If your expectation is the complete package with bustling multiplayer and polished online features, because the communication around the game talks about PvP/online, and there is also mention of a multiplayer update arriving after launch in some announcements. 4. Those who buy thinking of an active community, meta, and frequent balancing, it is safer to see how the post-launch behaves. I would also recommend waiting if you are very sensitive to mobile ports, because the demo is good, but the full game is where the rough edges appear. Menus repeated for dozens of hours, lots of team organization, and grind. In this scenario, seeing feedback from the Steam community after a few days can avoid a purchase made out of excitement. The game is indicated for fans of monster catching who like build construction and turn-based strategy, because the marketing and the demo reinforce move cooldowns, traits, passives, status, and planning in combat. If you enjoy thinking about synergy and timing, and not just elemental advantage, it seems made exactly for that. It is also well indicated for those who like retro pixel art aesthetics and want an RPG that is comfortable to play for long sessions, collecting creatures and exploring regions. The promise of over 170 creatures helps a lot with this collector player profile. I would not indicate or indicate only on sale. Those who want a super elaborate and cinematic story, or those who are already saturated with the capture train loop and need something that completely breaks the formula. The demo gave me more the vibe of a game that does the basics very well and holds you through the system, not through big narrative twists.